My name is Ellie. I am 24 years old. And 3 months ago my father looked me in the eye at a table full of family and called me a bastard who did not deserve to carry his last name. He did not whisper it. He did not say it in anger the way people sometimes say things they immediately regret. He said it the way someone says a fact they have been holding for a long time and are finally relieved to put down. There were 11 people at that table. My uncle, my cousins, my grandfather who is 78 years old and does not hear well but heard that word clearly enough. My father's sister Aunt Cora who went completely still. Everyone else stared at their plates. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I set down my fork, placed my napkin on the table and stood up without rushing. I drove home alone. 32 minutes on the highway. Music off. Windows down. And somewhere between the 7th exit and my front door, something shifted inside me. Not away from the pain. Towards something firmer. I was going to find out the truth. Not for him. Not to hurt him. For me. Because I had been carrying questions about where I came from my entire life and I was done carrying them quietly. I bought the DNA kit the next morning. The results would surprise every single one of us. Including my father. Before I tell you what those results said, I need you to understand something. This story is not really about DNA. It is about what happens when someone decides you do not belong, and then the truth comes back and proves them completely wrong in front of everyone they made sure was watching. If any part of that already feels familiar, I hope you will stay with me to the end. If you want to hear how this turns out, please subscribe. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from right now. I genuinely want to know who is out there tonight. Let me take you back to the beginning. I was adopted at birth. My parents, Patrick, Ann and Whitfield, brought me home from the hospital on a Thursday in October. I have seen the photograph from that day. My mother is holding me in both arms, standing in the hospital doorway wearing a yellow cardigan. She is smiling so wide her eyes are nearly closed. My father is standing beside her with one hand on her back. He is smiling too. That photograph used to sit on the mantel in the living room. After my mother passed away 2 years ago, it disappeared. I have never asked where it went. I think I already know the answer. My mother was the reason that house felt like home. My father was the reason it sometimes did not. My mother and Whitfield was the kind of woman who made you feel like you were enough without ever having to say so out loud. She was a primary school teacher for 22 years. She had a way of being fully present in a conversation, like whatever you were saying was the most important thing happening in the world right now. She wanted children badly. She and Patrick tried for 5 years before the doctors gave them an answer they were not hoping for. Adoption became the plan. They went through the process carefully. Took 3 years. I was the result of that long wait. Growing up, I always knew I was adopted. My mother told me early and gently, the way you tell a child something important when you want them to understand it without being frightened of it. She said, "We chose you." Which means we wanted you specifically. She meant every word. I believed her completely because you could hear the truth in her voice. My father never said those words. Not once. He was not cruel when I was young. He was simply distant. There is a difference between cruelty and distance, but distance does its own slow damage. It builds walls without making noise. You only notice the wall is there once you have been trying to climb it for years and your hands are tired. I spent most of my childhood trying to earn my way into a family that already had my name on the paperwork. Patrick Whitfield is 57 years old. He worked in property management for 30 years. He is organized, controlled, and careful with money in the particular way that people are when they grew up without enough of it. He coached youth football for 4 seasons when I was a girl. He was good at it. Patient with other people's children in ways I noticed even then. He saved a certain kind of patience for other people that he did not always bring home. He never hit me. I want to be clear about that. This is not that kind of story. His damage was quieter and harder to describe. It was in the way he introduced me to people. He would say, "This is Ellie," and leave a pause exactly where my daughter should have gone. It was in the way he talked about the Whitfield family history, his grandfather's land, his father's name, the things passed down through generations, and never once included me in that story. Not even by accident. I spent a lot of my childhood trying to solve that problem. Good grades. Clean record. No trouble at school or at home. I was trying to earn something I did not understand yet could not be earned. Something that was either given freely or not given at all. That lesson took a very long time to learn. My mother died on a Wednesday morning in March, 2 years before the night at the dinner table. It was her heart. She had known for a year that it was coming but kept most of the details from me. I think she did that because she did not want me spending her last year watching her instead of living. That was so completely like her. Even in leaving, she was trying to protect me. I drove to the house as soon as the call came. Patrick was sitting at the kitchen table with both hands flat on the surface, staring at nothing in particular. I sat with him for 2 hours. We did not say much. I thought that grief might bring us closer. I believed that losing her together might remind us that we were still family regardless of everything else. It did not work that way. In the weeks after the funeral, Patrick became quieter. Then he became sharper. The distance I had grown up navigating started to grow an edge. He canceled dinners without calling. He said things at the edges of conversations that I would find myself turning over long after I had left the house. Small things. Careful things. The kind that do not leave a mark you can point to but leave a mark regardless. And then, 3 months ago at a Sunday dinner he had asked me to attend, it finally became something too large for him to keep inside. The dinner was at my grandfather's house. Grandpa Walt's place on Sycamore Road, a wide brick house with a wraparound porch and a garden he has kept going for 40 years by himself. He turned 78 that weekend. The whole family had gathered to celebrate. 11 people around a large wooden table. Good food. Easy conversation. Then my Uncle Barry started talking about family land. A plot of inherited property in the county that had been in the Whitfield name for 3 generations. There was discussion about selling it. Arguments for keeping it. Someone mentioned passing it to the next generation. Someone else mentioned who had the strongest claim. Patrick looked at me. I should have seen what was coming. I do not know why I did not. That land belongs to Whitfield blood, he said. His voice was flat and even, the way it gets when he has already decided something and the conversation is just a formality. Not to someone we signed paperwork for. Silence. Then he said it, looking straight across the table at me. No hesitation. No lowering of his voice. You are not a Whitfield. You are a bastard who got lucky. Do not sit at this table and act like that land has anything to do with you. Grandpa Walt set down his fork very slowly. His face went tight in a way I had never seen before. I picked up my napkin. I folded it carefully. I stood up. Nobody stopped me. A few chairs shifted. Someone said my name softly. I think it was Aunt Cora. But I was already moving toward the front door and I did not turn around. I drove home with both windows down. It was a cool evening, the kind where the air smells like cut grass and something faintly smoky. I drove the full 32 minutes without music and without trying to think about anything specific. Sometimes you need the road to just move under you before the real thoughts will arrive in the right order. My best friend Damon called at 8:15. I had texted him one line. Patrick said it out loud this time. In front of everyone. He called immediately. He is 25, works nights at a logistics company, and has known me since we were 11 years old. He has heard every version of this story at every stage of my life. He knows the parts one say out loud and most of the parts one do not. You okay? He said. No, I said. But I will be. What are you going to do? I was sitting on my front step by then. The street was quiet. I looked up at the sky, the particular dark blue of early evening before real night settles in. I am going to find out where I actually come from, I said. Good, said Damon. It is time. I had thought about a DNA test before. More than once over the years. The idea would arrive and then drift away again like something you pick up and put down because the moment never feels quite right. Or maybe because some part of me was afraid of what I might not find. Empty results. A list of distant strangers. More questions instead of answers. Sometimes the unknown feels safer than finding out the unknown is actually nothing. That night something was different. The fear was still present. But something else had arrived alongside it. Something that had been building for years and had finally found its moment. I was tired of not knowing. I was tired of being told I did not belong without having any facts of my own to stand on. I opened my laptop at the kitchen table. I found a reputable DNA testing service and read through what the test covered. Ancestry. Genetic relatives. Shared percentages. The science behind it was presented clearly. I ordered the kit at 10:47 in the evening with a cup of coffee going cold beside my keyboard. Damon came over the following evening. He sat at my kitchen table while I unboxed the kit, read the instructions carefully and registered my sample online. You nervous? He asked. Yes, I said. But it is the kind of nervous where you know you are doing the right thing even while your hands are shaking. The testing company said results would take 3 to 4 weeks. That is a long time when you are waiting for something that feels important. It is the kind of wait that makes you notice every day on the calendar. You check the progress portal more often than you intend to and then feel slightly embarrassed about how often you are checking it. I filled the waiting period by doing something I had never allowed myself to do before. I started going through what little I had. My adoption had been a closed adoption, which was common for the year I was born. The agency that processed it had closed down years later. I had a small folder of paperwork my mother had kept in the filing cabinet in the spare room. After she passed, I had brought it home with me. I had never opened it fully. I would get partway through and stop myself like a book you keep starting but cannot quite commit to. This time I opened every page. Most of it was standard legal language. Forms, dates, signatures, approvals. My mother's name. My father's name. Dates of hearings and placements. But there was one small detail I had skipped every time before. In the section marked Origin of Child, a social worker had written 4 words by hand in blue ink. Born in this county. The same county where Patrick Whitfield had grown up, gone to school and lived his entire adult life. Aunt Cora called me on a Thursday 10 days after the dinner at Walt's house. Cora is Patrick's younger sister. She is 52 years old, lives across town and works as a nurse at the county hospital. She is direct in the way that nurses often become after many years of delivering difficult news to people who are not ready to receive it. She has learned that gentle circles around hard things rarely help anyone. She had never called me outside of family occasions before. We were warm when we saw each other but did not have a private relationship beyond those gatherings. I owe you an apology, she said before I could even greet her properly. I should have said something at that table. I froze. I am not proud of it. You do not need to apologize for what he did. I know. But I want to. Pause. Ellie, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me. All right. Have you looked into your adoption? Your actual origins? I hesitated. Only Damon knew about the DNA test. I have started to, I said carefully. A longer pause this time. Something in the quality of the silence shifted. There are things I know, she said slowly. Things I was never sure whether to say. But after the other night, I think staying quiet has gone on long enough. We met at a coffee shop near her workplace on a Saturday morning. She was already seated when I arrived, both hands wrapped around a mug, not drinking from it. Just holding it the way people hold warm things when they need something steady. I sat down. She looked at me for a moment before speaking, like she was organizing something inside herself into the right order. When Patrick was 26, she said, he had a relationship. Before he met your mother. Her name was Vivian. They were together for about a year and it ended badly. He never spoke about her afterward. I only know what I pieced together from things overheard and one conversation we had when he was younger and less guarded than usual. I sat still and listened. Vivian got pregnant, Cora continued. Patrick did not know. She never told him. She moved away, had the baby and placed the baby for adoption. Patrick found out she had been pregnant years later, from a mutual friend who mentioned it without understanding that it mattered. By then the trail was old and cold. He searched for a while. Then he stopped. She looked at her mug. I never knew what happened to that baby. I did not know if it was a boy or a girl. But Ellie. She looked up at me. Her eyes were steady and serious. The timing matches you exactly. I drove home from that coffee shop in complete silence. I know I stopped at a red light at the corner of Maple and 5th because I sat through the green without moving and the car behind me honked twice before I pulled forward. I turned left, drove 3 blocks on instinct and parked in front of my building. I sat in the car for a while without getting out. Vivian. A woman I had never heard of. A pregnancy Patrick did not know about. A baby placed for adoption in the same county where I was born in the same year I was born. To a woman who had moved away quietly and quickly and left no trail behind her. My birth year matched. My county matched. A closed adoption matched the pattern of a woman who wanted no record to follow her. I thought about Patrick at that table. The flat, certain way he had said those words. Not a man in the grip of anger. A man who believed something completely, had believed it for a long time and was finally saying it out loud. He believed I had no blood connection to the Whitfield family. He had always believed that. He might have been saying those words to his own daughter the whole time. I went inside. I made tea I did not drink. I sat at the kitchen table until the room went dark around me. The DNA results were still 10 days away. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at my desk trying to finish a work report when my phone lit up on the table beside my keyboard. The subject line read, "Your DNA results are ready." I stared at that notification for about 90 seconds without touching the phone. Damon had texted me that morning, "Results should be close. You holding up?" I had replied, "Yes," trying not to check the portal every hour. That was not entirely true. I had been checking it every hour since Monday morning. I picked up the phone. I opened the app. My hands were steady, but there was something happening in my chest that I did not have a word for. Not quite fear. Not quite hope. Something that lives between the two when the answer is about to arrive. The first page showed my ethnicity breakdown. I skimmed past it. That was not what I needed. I tapped through to the section labeled DNA matches. This connected you to other users of the service who shared your genetic material. It listed them by relationship and by percentage of shared DNA. The list loaded slowly. Several names I did not recognize. Distant cousins, the algorithm suggested. Fourth degree. Third degree. All expected. Then my eyes moved to the top of the list. The highest match. The largest percentage. I read the name. I read it a second time. The name at the top was not Patrick. It was Walter Whitfield. Grandpa Walt. I sat completely still. My brain worked to catch up with what my eyes were reading. Walter Whitfield, age 78. Shared DNA, 24.3%. Predicted relationship. Grandchild. I read that predicted relationship 3 separate times. Grandchild. Not a distant cousin. Not an ancestral overlap. Grandchild. The algorithm was saying that Walter Whitfield and I shared the kind of genetic material that places exactly one generation between us. That he could be my biological grandfather. Which meant that one of Walter Whitfield's children was my biological parent. Walt had 2 children. A daughter who lived out of state, had her own biological children, and had never adopted anyone. I knew her slightly from family occasions. And a son. I set the phone face down on my desk. I pressed both palms flat on the surface in front of me. The room was very quiet. Outside a car passed. A dog barked somewhere 2 streets over. Ordinary, unhurried sounds. The world continuing exactly as it always did. Inside that quiet, something was rearranging itself. A picture that had been blurry for my entire life was coming into sharp, clear focus, one edge at a time. Patrick Whitfield was not just the man who raised me with distance and doubt. He was my biological father. I called Damon at 3:17 in the afternoon. He picked up on the second ring. "Results?" he said immediately, no greeting. "Yes." "And?" I told him. I said it plainly because in that moment the plain words were the only ones available to me. Walter Whitfield. 24.3%. Predicted relationship. Grandchild. The math leading in only one direction. A long silence on his end. "Ellie," he said slowly. "Say that again." I said it again exactly as before. Damon went quiet for a full 30 seconds. I could hear him breathing steady and slow. "Okay," he finally said. "So Patrick has spent your entire life making you feel like you do not belong to his family." "Yes." "And he is your biological father." "Yes." "He called you a bastard in front of 11 people." "Yes." "Ellie, he is literally the reason." He stopped himself. Started again. "He is the one who..." He stopped again. Then he let out a slow, long exhale. "This is the kind of thing that does not feel real while you are still inside it." "No," I said. "It does not." "What do you want to do?" I had been sitting with that question for 22 minutes already, turning it slowly in my mind from different angles. "I want to do this right," I said. "Not quickly." "Right." I went back to Aunt Cora 2 days later. I did not call ahead. I drove directly to her house and knocked on the front door on a Thursday evening. She opened it, took one look at my face and stepped back to let me inside without asking a single question. That was one of the things I had always quietly appreciated about Cora. She read situations without needing them explained. We sat in her kitchen. She poured water for both of us. I placed my phone flat on the table between us with the DNA results open on the screen. She read it carefully. I watched her face as she worked through the information. First close attention. Then a small frown as she calculated the percentages. Then something shifted. Her expression moved through several things in quick succession. Recognition. The confirmation of something she had long suspected. And then something that looked very close to grief. She set the phone down on the table. You already suspected this, I said. It was not really a question. She nodded slowly. Not with certainty. But after Vivian. After the timing. After all of it. She pressed her lips together. I hoped I was wrong about what I thought the timing meant. You were not wrong. No. She folded her hands. I was not. Pause. Does Patrick know you have done this test? No. She nodded once, thinking. You have to decide how you want to tell him. And you have to decide whether you want witnesses when you do. The three of us sat in Cora's living room on a Saturday afternoon. Damon on one end of the sofa. Cora in the armchair by the window. Me in the middle. 3 mugs of tea going slowly cold on the table. Cora spoke first. Patrick tends to deny things that are uncomfortable. He always has since we were children. If you go to him alone, he will find a way to reframe the conversation until he is back on solid ground. He is very practiced at that. Damon nodded. He was turning his phone over and over in his hand, which is what he does when his thoughts have not quite finished organizing themselves. Grandpa Walt is part of this whether he wants to be or not, Damon said. The match is with him directly. He is the bridge between Ellie and everything else. Whatever Patrick tries to argue about the test, Walt's presence in those results is not something you can talk around. I had been thinking about Grandpa Walt since the moment his name appeared on my screen. He was 78 years old. He had been at that dinner table and heard Patrick say those words. He had set down his fork and gone very still and said nothing at all. I need to go to Walt first, I said. Before anyone else. Both of them nodded without hesitation. He deserves to know before Patrick does, Cora said quietly. Grandpa Walt was on his porch swing when I pulled onto Sycamore Road. He had a crossword puzzle on his knee and a glass of sweet tea on the small table beside him. He watched me walk up the path without moving, the way older people watch things arrive when they have learned to be patient with whatever life decides to send. I sat down in the chair across from him. I thought you might come, he said. His voice was low and a little rough at the edges the way voices get after many years of use. I looked at him carefully. You knew. He set the crossword down. About Vivian. About what Patrick told me years ago, that there had been a pregnancy he found out about too late to do anything. When Anne and Patrick brought you home, I did the math quietly. He looked at his tea. I was never certain. Anne was so happy. The happiest I had seen her in years. And Patrick? I said. Walt looked up at me then. His eyes were clear and steady. Patrick never told me he suspected anything. But I have wondered in these recent years whether somewhere inside himself he knew. Whether that knowing was part of the reason he could never look at you the right way. Some people cannot face what they are responsible for. So they push the evidence away instead. He reached for his tea. His hand was not quite steady. Walt agreed to be there when I spoke to Patrick. He did not hesitate or ask for time to think about it. He picked up his sweet tea, took one slow sip, set it down on the small table beside him and said, "Tell me when." That was the whole answer. I had expected him to suggest caution. To recommend a private conversation first, a careful approach, perhaps just the two of us and Patrick with no audience. He suggested none of that. "Walt," I said carefully, "this is going to be very hard on Patrick." "Yes," he said simply. "It is going to be the hardest thing that has happened to him in a long time. But the truth tends to be hard when it has been avoided for many years. That is not the truth's fault." I called Cora on the drive home. She was already committed. She said she would arrange a dinner at her house the following weekend and make sure Patrick attended. She would also include my Uncle Barry and 2 of my cousins. Not a large crowd. But enough people that the moment would be real and witnessed. Enough that Patrick could not walk away from it as though it had happened in a private room between 2 people where no one could be sure of anything. I spent the rest of that week preparing myself. Not for a fight. I was not going there to fight. I was going to give a man the truth about himself and let him find out what to do with it. Cora's house on a Saturday evening at 6 o'clock. A wide kitchen table, a roasting smell coming from the oven, warm light over everything. 7 people. Uncle Barry. Two cousins, Neil and Priya. Grandpa Walt in the chair he always took at any table, the one with the most room, the one nearest the window. Cora moving between the kitchen and the dining room with quiet purpose. Damon, because I had asked and Cora had agreed without hesitation. And Patrick. He arrived at 6:10, slightly late, which was unusual for him. He was wearing a dark green collared shirt. He looked at me when he came through the door and his face did what it always does when he sees me. It went neutral. Measured. Not rude. Just careful, like a man quietly calculating how much energy this evening was going to cost him. He said hello to the room. He shook Damon's hand with mild surprise. He took a seat. Cora had told him nothing beyond the basic invitation. A family dinner. Come and eat. We need to spend time together. He had no reason to expect anything different from any other family gathering. I sat directly across from him. My phone was in my pocket. The DNA results were open on the screen, already loaded, waiting. Grandpa Walt was 4 seats to my right. I was steady. I had been preparing for this moment for 3 weeks. I was ready. We made it through the soup course without anything breaking open. That sounds like a small thing, but it was not. There is a kind of ordinary conversation that has to happen before a hard one can find its moment. People need to settle. Plates in hand, glasses filled, the room breathing normally around them. Barry talked about a project at his workplace. Priya mentioned thinking about going back to school. Neil refilled everyone's water without being asked. Ordinary, unhurried Saturday dinner sounds. Patrick was quiet but not noticeably so. He ate. He responded when spoken to. He asked Cora how the garden was coming along for the season. Then Walt set down his spoon. That was the signal we had agreed on the night before. When Walt set his spoon down, I would speak. I took one slow breath. I want to say something, I said, before we go any further into the evening. Patrick looked up from his bowl. The table went attentive the way tables do when someone uses that particular tone of voice. Neil stopped mid-reach for the bread. Barry set his fork down carefully. 3 months ago, I said, at Grandpa Walt's birthday dinner, Patrick told me in front of this family that I was a bastard who did not deserve to carry his last name. No one spoke. The room held the sentence carefully. I have spent the past 3 months finding out whether that is actually true. I took my phone from my pocket and placed it face up on the table. The DNA results were already on the screen. I turned the phone toward the center so it faced the room. I took a DNA test, I said. These are the results. Cora passed the phone to Barry first. He read the screen carefully. His eyebrows slowly drew together. He passed it to Priya. She read it and looked up at me, then across the table at Patrick. He passed it to Neil without a word. Patrick had not moved. The highest DNA match in my results, I said, speaking clearly to the whole table, shares 24.3% of my genetic material with me. The algorithm identifies that level of shared DNA as a grandparent-to-grandchild relationship. I paused. That person is a registered user of the service. Their name is in the system. Walt reached slowly into his shirt pocket. He withdrew a small folded piece of paper. He had registered on the same DNA service 2 weeks earlier at my request. He unfolded the paper and placed it flat on the table in front of him. His own results. His own match list. My name at the very top. I am the match, Walt said quietly. His voice did not shake. Ellie is in my results as my grandchild. The biology says so clearly. He looked directly at his son. Which means, Patrick, that this young woman sitting across from you did not come from nowhere. She came from us. The room held a silence that felt like something solid. Patrick looked at Walt's paper. Then at my phone. Then at the tablecloth directly in front of him, where his hands were resting flat and very still, exactly the way they had rested on the kitchen table the morning my mother died. That is not possible, he said. His voice was low and controlled. Vivian, Walt said simply. Just the one word. It landed in the room like something dropped from a great height. Patrick's head came up slowly. I know about Vivian, Walt continued. I know what you told me years ago, that there had been a pregnancy you found out about too late. And went and brought this girl home. I did the math and I kept it to myself. He paused. And I think, Patrick, somewhere in yourself you did the same math. And you chose to keep it to yourself too. A long, complete silence. Barry leaned forward slightly. Patrick. Is this true? Patrick did not answer Barry. He was looking at me across the table. His face had moved into something I had never seen on it before. Not the flat, measured control I had grown up watching him maintain. Something underneath that. Something exposed and unsteady, the way ground looks after a long rain has washed the surface away. I did not know for certain, he said finally. His voice had changed completely. Smaller. Like something tightly held had slowly released. But you suspected, I said. A pause that lasted a long time. Yes, he said quietly. For a long time. Damon said nothing. He sat with his hands around his glass and watched, because he understood clearly that this was not his moment to fill with words. Cora spoke from the kitchen doorway. Her voice was steady and quiet and carried to every corner of the room. Patrick, you sat at a table on our father's birthday and called your own daughter a bastard. The sentence sat in the room the way heavy weather sits in the air before it breaks. Patrick closed his eyes. He kept them closed for a long moment. When he opened them they were wet. Not falling over yet. Just present the way grief sits before it decides what shape to take. Barry exhaled slowly and said nothing. Neil stared at the tablecloth. Priya had both hands wrapped around her glass and was looking at the window, giving him a moment. I looked at my father. My biological father. A man who had spent more than 2 decades failing to claim me because he was afraid of what claiming me would require him to admit, to explain, to open back up. He had pushed the evidence of his own past away by pushing me away. I do not need an apology tonight, I said. My voice was calm and even. I am not ready for one and you are not ready to give one properly yet. What I need right now is for you to sit with what this actually is. He nodded. One small, honest movement. Walt reached across the table and placed his large, warm hand over mine. He did not say a word. He did not need to. It has been 3 months since that dinner at Cora's house. Patrick and I have spoken 4 times. The conversations are short and careful, the way early conversations always are when 2 people are trying to find their footing on ground that has completely shifted beneath them. He has not said the word sorry yet. I told him I did not need it on a schedule. I only needed it when he actually meant it all the way through. That moment is still coming. I believe it will arrive. Grandpa Walt calls me every Sunday now. Short calls. We talk about his crossword and my week and small ordinary things. He told me 2 weeks ago quietly that he should have said something years ago. He thought staying quiet was protecting the family. He knows now that staying quiet was just allowing damage to continue in a different room. I told him that staying quiet is how families pass damage down through generations without ever meaning to. He agreed. He sounded tired when he said it. Not old tired. Truth tired. The kind of tired that comes from finally setting something very heavy down after carrying it far too long. Damon came over last Friday. We ate and talked about everything and nothing. At one point he said, "You know what I keep thinking? You took one small test. Sent one small tube in the mail. And the whole thing came open. Not open like broken," I said. "Open like a window." He thought about that. Then he nodded slowly. "If you have spent your whole life being made to feel like you do not belong somewhere, I want you to hear this one thing clearly. The person who made you feel that way was never qualified to make that decision. They never were. The truth was always going to outlast their version of it. You just needed time. And you needed to be brave enough to go looking.